From the headquarters of Telesur English in Quito, Ecuador, this is From the South. I am Doris Polo. Beginning with news from the Caribbean, Dominica is tense after a standoff between police and protesters on Monday night. Security forces set up barricades in Rosso as protesters called for the implementation of electoral reforms dictated by the Organization of American States at a meeting in August earlier this year. Tear gas was also used to disperse demonstrators trying to access the street where the government headquarters and country's financial center are located. The government said that the measures, including voter ID cards, are not feasible. General elections are scheduled for December 6, 2019. Now, the Dominican Prime Minister Roosevelt Skerrit is addressing the country. Let's go live to Rosso.
I have done this in order that a sense of calm, de-escalation, non-provocation, and peace will prevail. I call for peace. I call for calm. I call for respect for law and order. And I call on the protesters to refrain from actions that would result in any kind of harm to persons or damage to property and our economy. I also call on the opposition to let our elections proceed in the usual manner. We can disagree politically, and we can vote for the party of our choice without resorting to this kind of violence. As I have been doing throughout this campaign, I urge all Dominicans to unify as one people and put our country first. If you put this country first, your love of country will guide you as to how to behave and how to vote, since you would do nothing to put our country at risk. Not after we have come so far after the devastating nature of Hurricane Maria. Fellow Dominicans, I ask you to join me in prayer on this nomination day, and as the country moves to Election Day on December 6. It is consistent with this noble ideal that the leadership of the Dominican Labour Party has taken a decision to suspend all political activities this coming Sunday and to encourage its members and supporters to join the Catholic Church in observance of Christ the King at the Windsor Park Stadium. Indeed, even before Sunday, the Dominican Labour Party will be hosting the National Gospel Extravaganza on Friday, November 22nd at Cassabruce Playing Field. This event starts at 6 p.m. and will feature, once again, internationally acclaimed gospel singer, Pastor Donnie McCluckin, along with the best of local gospel talent on Dominica. This is a concert to which we're inviting all Dominicans, so we can rid ourselves of the stain and the blotch associated with last evening's disturbances, and hopefully avoid a repeat of February 7th, 2 years ago, when very serious attempts were made to destroy our historic capital city. I appeal to all Dominicans, resident at home and abroad, to denounce the pursuit of violence by those who should know better, and to allow peace and tranquility to reign in this country for the next 17 days in the first instance and in the aftermath of the general elections. Because when all is said and done, more than anything else, we have a country to build, not to destroy. May the Almighty God bless you all. May God bless the Commonwealth of Dominica, and may peace reign in our land. I thank you.
So that was Dominica's Prime Minister Roosevelt Skerrit. And what we just heard was his response to violent protests which took place in the capital Roseau last night. We saw violent repression, or rather tear gas, used by police officers. Now, Dominica, today is actually nomination day in Dominica, and elections are set for December 6th. And the opposition is calling for electoral reform, which is actually proposed by the Organization of American States. And what the Dominican Prime Minister is saying is that there isn't really enough time, and what they are proposing is not feasible for the elections, and so he's calling for peace. And this coming Sunday, there was expected to be some campaigning by his political party, and what he asked for was that Dominicans unite and not participate in violent acts in order to get the government's attention, rather to look forward to peace and really voting for whichever political party they prefer. And he said, you know, they rather have prayer on Sunday than election campaigning. And so we're moving on now to protests in Haiti, where at least 4 people were shot in the capital on Monday, hours after President Jovenel Moise rejected calls to resign. Hundreds of marchers from the Delmas to Pétionville neighborhoods were on the streets when shots were fired from nearby. It has been reported that among the injured were 2 protesters, a police officer and a journalist.
We should sit and talk with everyone who truly wants change, and we can come to a good political agreement. We will put together a united national government with new objectives that will take great effort to eliminate corruption in the country.
Moving on. A judge has issued an arrest warrant for the former President of Paraguay, Horacio Cartes. The detention order relates to the Lava Jato corruption investigation that has rocked Latin American politics. Cartes is suspected of assisting Dario Miser, accused of being Brazil's biggest money launderer, to evade justice. Interpol had already issued a red alert for Cartes and has 100 agents acting to comply with the judge's order. On to Bolivia now. Thousands of campesinos and indigenous people marched into La Paz on Monday to demand the resignation of the de facto government. There are reports that Senator Janine Áñez, who declared herself president, may issue a decree to call new elections. The Constitution says only the Legislative Assembly can do this. However, the coup government is refusing to negotiate with the mass majority in the Assembly.
The indigenous people are standing up. We will not give in to them. If they want to kill us, then they can kill us. We indigenous women have been discriminated against, and our Huipala flag has been attacked. But here we are, the true Bolivian people, the indigenous people, standing firm. We thank the international media for showing what is really happening, because the Bolivian media tried to silence us.
Our correspondent, Freddy Morales, has the latest from La Paz.
Good afternoon. There have been no reports of any kind of incidents during mobilizations, but since midday, rural workers and Aymara women are stationed as lookouts around Murillo Square, where the National Assembly building and the governmental palace are located. Even though these groups remain peaceful, the socialist movement, which holds 70% of the seats in both houses of the Congress, have decided to suspend the session scheduled for Tuesday 10 in the morning. This suspension is a sign of a lack of agreement between the 70% of the Congress and the remaining 30% that are in charge of the government. The socialist movement said they remain open for negotiations with the government, but they still decided to suspend tomorrow's session in the Congress. This session was set to discuss ordinary matters and not ones related to the ongoing turmoil in the country. Meanwhile, the government has confirmed that they haven't reached an agreement with the socialist movement regarding a call for elections. Former members of the Electoral Tribunal are also holding discussions with the government on whether it is possible to hold elections authorized through a decree rather than by the National Assembly.
Now, in the city of Cochabamba, there is a tense standoff between protesters and the police. 3 separate marches of coca growers and other campesinos arrived in the city this Monday to protest against the massacre of 9 of their colleagues in Sacamba on Friday. The police blocked their way. The protesters blame the de facto president for the violence and demand her resignation. So far, at least 24 people have died in the repression of demonstrations over the coup against Evo Morales.
We want the resignation of the self-proclaimed president. We want justice for all our fallen colleagues. These have been murders. The police and the military are killing us as if we were animals. We want justice.
Still to come, things have reached boiling point in Haiti. We'll look at why after the break.
A review of the world news that investigates, incites analysis, and induces criticism, because every event has a context.
Pusimos el punto en la I.
Dotting the I. Saturdays, only on Telesur.
Welcome back. Now with the latest in Latin America, the Chilean police special task force known as Carabineros violently repressed a peaceful rally in Plaza Italia, where people have been gathering against the neoliberal system for 1 month. Repression against smaller protests on Monday saw gunshots fired by police, who also used water cannons and tear gas to disperse citizens. Despite the continued violent response by authorities, more protests are scheduled as citizens say they will not stop until a constituent assembly is formed to draft a new constitution. Our correspondent Leonel Retamal gives us the background on the demonstrations from Santiago.
It is now 1 month since the uprising began here in Chile against the injustices of the economic system and in favor of a constituent assembly to rewrite the Pinochet-era constitution. We're outside one of the metro stations where the protests began against an increase in the subway fares. Secondary school students began to demonstrate against the fare rise, and that had a domino effect in the rest of the population who joined the protests when they saw the repression used against the students. Among the many demands are fairer access to healthcare, education, housing and pensions, the most urgent daily needs of the Chilean people. But the underlying theme here is that the existing constitution from 1980 puts a lot of limits on addressing issues like these. So we see many huge demonstrations with millions taking to the streets. The government has announced a number of measures, but these have not satisfied most of the demonstrators. Last week there was an agreement in Parliament to hold a plebiscite as a step towards drawing up a new constitution. But this also failed to satisfy many people, and the calls for demonstrations have continued. President Piñera spoke on Sunday again, but this has not had any effect on the protesters either. A number of cases are before the courts this Monday over human rights abuses during the last month, and another big protest is being called in the afternoon to mark the 1 month of the revolt.
Many protesters say the proposed constitutional referendum does not guarantee enough space for social movements, and they are worried that the need for a 2/3 majority could block serious change. More in this report.
1 month after a social explosion rocked Chile, Congress tried to put an end to the conflict with an agreement to draft a new constitution. But people rejected the proposal, as social organizations and labor unions say people must continue to take the streets.
There are debates that still need to be had. Social parity, the participation of indigenous communities, this process is not yet at its end.
We call on people to continue mobilizing, to continue taking the streets. On Monday the 18th, we must go out
to fill public squares throughout the country to tell them that although they have the kitchen, we have the pots and the pans. And this does not end until the social movements say so.
It all began as a protest against the rise of public transport fares, but repression against high school students was the catalyst for a host of social demands to explode, quickly escalating into the social outburst that seeks to change the economic model at its root.
It was a political mistake not to realize the social explosion that was coming when we were clear about it. We had calls for social protests on September 5th, saying that we did not want more neoliberal system anymore, that we did not want our lives to worsen. But even so, the state did not take into account our opinion.
The balance in terms of human rights during this month has been negative. 26,000 people arrested, 2,381 wounded, 23 people dead, and 217 who have lost an eye, mainly as a result of the repressive actions of the police.
The eye situation is very serious, something not seen anywhere else in the world. In 1 month, we have more than 200 people with severe eye damage, and the other thing that we have not seen are the mental health problems that are a result of this situation.
All government measures have been rejected by the streets: decreasing public transport fares, a broader social agenda, changes to the pension system, and recently, a parliamentary agreement for a plebiscite for a new constitution.
Health, education, housing, pensions, all of these are things that concern the people on the streets. And we are seeing the government's inability to lead in the face of a social crisis. Every time the president has intervened, he has worsened the crisis.
The people on the street feel they are the protagonists of their own future. They have proven to have strength and power, and they don't want to return to the Chile that was before October 18.
In Venezuela, the national dialogue promoted by President Nicolas Maduro continues to advance towards a political agreement in the country. The Venezuelan president held a meeting on Monday with political leaders taking part in the national dialogue table to evaluate their progress. The meeting took place at Miraflores Palace. The current negotiations focus on the conditions to choose a new head for the National Electoral Council, or CNE, and the parliamentary elections scheduled for the year 2020. Speaking after the meeting, opposition representative Claudio Fermin praised the efforts made by the national government to renew the National Electoral Council.
They did the work, and Venezuela, who won a new National Electoral Council, the one who won better guarantees for elections. We can tell you that a steady and firm road is being built to start naming candidates to lead the National Electoral Council.
Meanwhile, the head of the government delegation and communications minister Jorge Rodriguez announced that several proposals from the opposition regarding economic and social matters have already been taken into consideration by President Nicolas Maduro.
Some proposals coming from the opposition at the National Dialogue table were quickly accepted by the constitutional President Nicolás Maduro Moros. One such proposal was extension of taxes to a large number of items that are imported and that will allow the population access to more goods, services and medicine at a lower price. There is a need to make procedures more agile for the mechanism of exporting and importing goods.
Up next, an update on strike action taken by South African Airways employees. We'll be right back.
Who's moving the chessmen? What interests and motivate the actors behind each event? The board is deployed there. Critical Move investigates every event from Monday to Friday. Only on Telesur.
Welcome back. In news from Africa, South Africa's Public Enterprises Minister Pravin Gordhan is set to meet striking workers at the state-owned airline in an effort to end the 5-day strike that has brought the airline to its knees. The minister will hold meetings with the leadership of the National Union of Metal Workers of South Africa and the South Africa Cabin Crew Association, the two unions that called the strike. More than 3,000 workers at the embattled airline downed tools last week, demanding higher wages and an end to a proposed retrenchment program. In neighboring Zimbabwe, citizens have been forced to opt for community health facilities as a 2-month-long strike by health practitioners cripples the sector. Zimbabwe is living its worst economic crisis in over a decade, which has forced doctors, nurses and midwives to hold a strike. People in need of medical treatment are forced to seek help in community health facilities, as a number of doctors from Cuba have been providing relief in some of the facilities, while the government continues to hold talks with the striking professionals.
Yes, I was worried. I didn't know what to do, because when we were looking for the perfect clinics, I don't know. But when I found the girl who told us to come here, I was relieved. Then I gave birth to my baby.
We know throughout Harare there are a lot of traditional birth attendants. We just don't know how many of our women are. If you go to our clinics right now, they're empty. Where are these women going to?
The African Union Commission and the World Health Organization have signed a memorandum of understanding aimed at strengthening their relationship and cooperation. The document was signed at the WHO headquarters by the African Union Commission Chairman Moussa Faki Mahamat and the Director General of the World Health Organization. The memorandum will, among other issues, see African countries working closely with the WHO to increase domestic investment in health.
The call to action is a bold commitment by African Union countries to increase domestic investment in health and to be accountable for that commitment. The Memorandum of Understanding we have signed today is an important step towards formalizing the cooperation between WHO and the African Union and to implementing the Addis Ababa call to action.
I believe that for WHO and for Africa, it's a new page that's opening of partnership, of cooperation, for achieving a goal that's health for all.
Palestinians have expressed outrage over the United States declaration that Israeli settlements in the occupied West Bank are not illegal, with chief negotiator Saeb Erekat calling it a major threat to international peace and security.
Israeli colonial settlements in the occupied Palestinian territories, including East Jerusalem, are not only illegal under international law, they are war crimes. And the statement of Mr. Pompeo, the Secretary of State of the United States, is absolutely rejected and must be condemned because once superpowers, once the Trump administration decide to undermine international law, once they become an administration that's pro-Israel's occupation, pro-Israel war crimes, this constitute a major threat to international peace and security. And this is turning the international community from the rules of international law, the rules of solving conflicts by peaceful means, into the rules of the jungle.
And we end in Catalonia, where the trial of President Quim Torra is underway for alleged disobedience to a higher authority. Hundreds of citizens came out in support of the Catalonian leader as the proceedings started.
For the first time, a sitting president is judged before his tenure is over. Quim Torra, the president of Catalonia, is facing a 20-month ban on holding public office and a €30,000 penalty for disobeying the Central Electoral Court, something Torra admitted he did.
No, I did not comply with the order. In other words, I disobeyed. But it was impossible to comply with an illegal order. Everyone in this court knows that the order was illegal. It was dictated by a body that did not have the power to do so.
Outside the court, political parties and social organizations showed support for Torra.
In Catalonia's Supreme Justice Court, they judge freedom of expression. They judge fundamental rights, civil and political rights.
We are not only supporting the president, but also to say that political issues should not be resolved by using the courts. This is evading reality and the real issues that exist between Catalonia and Spain.
Minutes before entering the Supreme Court building, President Torra was accompanied by dozens of protesters who supported him.
This is proof of how Spanish courts warp and manipulate the principle of legality, and as such, they can turn any action into a crime.
Today we can see once again that the Spanish state prefers repression over dialogue and negotiation.
Back in April, the Central Electoral Court ordered Quim Torra to remove this vow from the Generalitat building, saying that during an electoral season, public institutions must show neutrality. Torra removed it, but it was apparently too late. He then placed one in support of freedom of speech. Torra's trial will be used by pro-independence parties when it comes time to swear in Pedro Sánchez. If Torra is banned from holding public office, Pere Aragonés would become interim president, and Parliament would have 2 months to find a new president. If they fail, then snap elections must be announced.
We are not contemplating the president to be banned from public office, as he himself said, so that is our working scenario.
Seeing a president of the Generalitat claiming this is terribly shameful. This is the moment to take stock of what's happening. We must gather our strength before negotiations.
Torra's sentence will be announced within a month, but if appeals are filed, the final ruling could be pushed back past next spring.
And with that, we've come to the end of this news brief. You can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter and Instagram. For Telesur English, I'm Doris Polo. Thank you for watching.
Speriamo che non vivremo la guerra, basta. Abbiamo fatto una guerra e abbiamo perso tantissima gente, tantissimi padri, nonni, amici.